Good evening to everyone, and a heartfelt welcome to today's discussion organized by Talking Films Online, also known as TFO. My name is Tanmay, and I am your host for today's discussion. TFO began its journey with Professor Nikhila and Dr. Gita Vishwanath in June 2020 during the lockdown. Over the years, TFO has metamorphosed from a spontaneous idea into an expanding community of cinephiles encompassing scholars, researchers, students, professors, filmmakers, and anyone passionate about cinema. We are delighted to have sustained this forum thanks to you, our dedicated participants, who join us every Saturday at 9 p.m. as per Indian Standard Time to talk about cinema. It has been TFO's practice to invite individuals to select and lead discussions on chosen films, which participants are free to watch at their own time and place. TF has also the pleasure of hosting eminent filmmakers, scholars, professors, cinematographers, and editors like Aparna Sen, Amal Palekar, Girish Kasaravalli, and Adur Gopalakrishnan. Our journey has also included film festivals such as South Asian, East European, Iranian, Women's Cinema, and among others. Every June, TFO hosts a smartphone short filmmaking contest for students and organizes a lecture series in university departments to commemorate its anniversary. Last September, we organized our first offline event, an international seminar on Indian cinema in the digital era, in collaboration with FCT Baroda. This year also, we are going to organize another international conference in hybrid mode titled Screen to Street, Decoding Cinema in Everyday Life in collaboration with Banwarilal Bhalotia College, Asansol, West Bengal. Now, friends, for tonight's discussion, we'll focus on the film Como Agua para Chocolate. In English, it is translated as Like Water for Chocolate and directed by Alfonso Arau. The film has been chosen by Mr. Amnraj Singh, who will also lead the discussion today. It gives me great pleasure to introduce Mr. Amnraj Singh, a dedicated educator with over 2 years of experience in teaching English as a second language to socioeconomically disadvantaged Hispanic and Latinx students. Deeply passionate about modern languages and linguistic theory, Mr. Singh has attained C2 level in Spanish, B2 in Chinese, and B1 in French. His commitment to language education was recognized through a full grant from the University of Salamanca, Spain, where he pursued the diploma in Hispanic linguistic studies under the auspices of the Instituto Cervantes. Currently based in Vadodara, Gujarat, Mr. Singh is an avid reader of philosophy and international affairs and enjoys watching documentaries and debates in his spare time. We are truly honored to have Amanda Sir with us today, and we look forward to an engaging and thought-provoking discussion. Now it's my time to handing over the mic to Amanda sir. Sir, please. The dais is yours.
Thank you very much. Good evening, and thank you for being here. Tonight, I want to take a thorough and sustained look at Alfonso Arau's 1992 film Como Agua para Chocolate, the cinematic adaptation of Laura Esquivel's novel of the same name. This will not be a casual overview. What I hope to do is guide you through an extended reflection on how the film constructs meaning, how it works as an adaptation, how it belongs to a particular cultural and historical moment, and finally, how it mobilizes the language of cinema to give visual form to the literary mode of magical realism. The film is often remembered for its sensuality and its emotional intensity, but beneath those qualities lies a sophisticated negotiation between narrative, materiality, cultural tradition, and the expressive capacities of cinema. Over the next hour or so, I want to unfold those layers carefully. To begin, it is useful to situate the film in its historical context. When Como Agua para Chocolate was released in Mexico in 1992, the national film industry was emerging from a difficult decade. Throughout the 90s, Mexican cinema endured a period of instability, punctuated by inconsistent government support, disrupted production cycles, and the growing dominance of Hollywood imports that increasingly crowded local films out of Mexican theaters. Producers struggled to fund projects, and audiences often gravitated towards foreign films that benefited from stronger marketing and distribution networks. Yet, in midst of this turbulence, a number of filmmakers were attempting to revive national cinema by drawing more deliberately upon cultural particularity. Films, that is to say, films rooted in Mexican social realities, Mexican landscapes, and its narrative traditions. Arau's adaptation arrives in that transitional moment, and it becomes almost instantly one of the most recognizable cultural products of Mexican cinema in that decade. It was not a blockbuster in the contemporary sense, but a genuine popular phenomenon. Mexican audiences responded strongly to its mixture of romance, family drama, historical background, and most especially culinary detail. But even more than that, they recognized it in a world that felt authentically drawn from Mexican everyday life. The De la Garza Ranch, with its kitchen at the center, its matriarchal authority figure, its rituals of food and celebration, and its tensions between tradition and desire, felt intimately familiar. Viewers perceived the story not as a mythic tale removed from reality, but as a heightened version of experiences, domestic rhythms, and intergenerational tensions that only they could understand deeply. The international trajectory of the film was equally remarkable. In the United States, where foreign language films seldom achieved widespread distribution at the time, Como Agua para Chocolate became the highest grossing Spanish language film in the US. Part of this success can be attributed to the American art house distribution networks that were expanding in the early 1990s and were hungry for international titles that could appeal to audiences seeking culturally specific stories. But much of the film's appeal lay in its blend of intimacy and universality. Although unmistakably Mexican in setting, tone, and humor, the film addressed themes such as passion, repression, family obligation, emotional inheritance. These themes they were able to resonate across cultures throughout the pan-Hispanic world. It is also very important to recognize the global literary landscape into which the film was released. That period of the late 80s and early 90s saw renewed international interest in magical realism in literature. And this was in part fueled by the resurgence in the popularity of Gabriel Garcia Marquez's works, namely Cien Años de Soledad, Hundred Years of Solitude, Isabel Allende, La Casa de los Espíritus, The House of Spirits, and other Latin American authors whose work lay the foundation for this movement. Readers and viewers around the world were primed to embrace narratives in which the extraordinary emerged gently from the ordinary, which is which is basically what magical realism is about, magic rooted in reality, where emotional truth manifests through material transformation. An adaptation that approached magical realism not as fantasy, but as an expression of sensory and emotional life, therefore found an unusually receptive audience. One feature that I would say shaped the film's reception was the collaboration between Laura Esquivel and Alfonso Arau. It is notable that Esquivel wrote both the novel and the screenplay, and at the time of the film's production, she was incidentally married to Arau, who was the director of this adaptation. Many feel that this creative partnership produced a sort of distinct coherence in the film, and viewers tended to assume that the film was necessarily faithful or at least fundamentally aligned with the novel's intentions. While adaptation is never a one to one transference from text to screen, the shared authorship created the impression that the film was an extension of the novel's voice rather than a reinterpretation by an external filmmaker. The relationship between writer and director, between writer and translator, allowed for a unified tone and a shared understanding of the story's emotional core, even as the film necessarily reshaped the narrative to fit the demands of cinema and cinematography. Now, to understand what the film accomplishes as an adaptation, we must first consider the literary architecture of Esquivel's novel. Published in, as we know, 1989, the novel used a distinctive and deliberate structure. For example, 12 chapters, each corresponding to a month of the year, were introduced by a recipe. And these recipes were not incidental nor ornamental, as they set the tone for the chapter and were the anchor of the narrative in the cyclical rhythms of domestic life. They reminded the reader that the kitchen is not merely a location, but a temporal system, a place where time is measured by seasons, by preparation, by ritual, by family gatherings, by celebrations, and by grief, and most importantly, by the repeated work of feeding others. Our protagonist Tita inhabits inhabits this cyclical world, and her emotional life unfolds through the rhythms of cooking in this temporal system, that is the kitchen. Now, the structure also foregrounds the central tension of the novel, the family tradition dictating that the youngest daughter must remain unmarried in order to care for her mother until her death. It is this tradition that shapes Tita's fate, pardon. Her love for Pedro is forbidden not because of personal animosity or incompatibility, but because of a rule older than herself, embedded in the family's practices and enforced with rigid certainty by her mother, Mama Elena. The drama of the novel emerges from the collision between individual desire and inherited obligation. Magical realism, as we know, functions in the novel as the expressive medium through which this collision is articulated. Tita's emotions enter the food she prepares, affecting those who consume it. Her sadness becomes a physical sickness shared by her wedding guests. Her longing becomes a heat that transforms her sister Gertrudis. These events, described in plain, unadorned language, are neither puzzling nor shocking within the novel's world. They represent a deeper truth that emotions denied verbal expressions will find material pathways outward. Magical realism, I would say, here is less a device than a worldview, an understanding that the physical and emotional dimensions of life are intertwined, and that domestic labor, far from being numb or repetitive, is permeated with affect. With this literary background in mind, we can now explore how Arau approaches the task of adaptation. One of the most striking changes is structural. The film abandons the novel's recipe based architecture and instead divides the story into monthly chapters. By doing this, it opts out of a linear narrative progression. This change is not a simple matter of omission. It rather reflects an understanding of the cyclical temporal structure, while evocative in in its prose, would interrupt the flow of a cinematic narrative. The film must maintain forward motion, and the episodic structure of the novel would risk fragmenting the emotional trajectory. Arau retains references to recipes and food preparations, but he integrates them into the story rather than presenting them as former chapter headings. The tone also shifts in the adaptation. The novel's narrator often adopts a lightly ironic or humorous voice that comments on the events with a degree of distance. The film cannot rely on this voice without creating a sense of disjunction between narration and action. Instead, the film leans more heavily into emotional presence. It adopts a melodramatic register, not in the sense of exaggeration, but through heightened attention. Heightened attention to what, you might ask? Heightened attention to feeling, to gesture, and to the expressive power of performance. The emotional intensity of Tita's longing and frustration becomes the organizing principle of many scenes. Cinema, after all, tends to externalize emotions that literature can keep internal. Arau recognizes this and allows the film to operate in a register that foregrounds the body and the senses. Now, despite these changes, the film retains the device of a narrator, Tita's grandniece, who recounts the story as a piece of family history, being one of the examples. This choice maintains some of the novel's distance while giving the film a sense of temporal layering. The story we watch is part of a lineage passed down through generations, and the presence of a narrator signals that the events have become, in some sense, communal memory. To move deeper into the film's mechanics, we can turn to what is arguably its greatest accomplishment: the construction of a cinematic language capable of representing magical realism without turning it into a spectacle. This is where Arau and Lubezki's collaboration proves essential. Rather than relying on special effects or visual cues that would signal departure from reality, they create a world in which the boundary between emotional and material life becomes permeable. The film establishes this world through its lighting. For example, Lubezki's preference for naturalistic light results in scenes suffused with gentle warmth, and the kitchen glows with the heat of stoves and ovens. The courtyard reflects the softness of late afternoon sun. Even nighttime scenes maintain a subdued glow from candles or lanterns. This lighting aesthetic conveys a continuity across time and space. It suggests that everything from chopping onions to falling in love belongs to a shared atmospheric world. Now, color reinforces this continuity. We are going to see how. Now, the palette of the film of the coloring scheme is dominated by earthy and muted tones that are evoking both the physical environment of the ranch and the textures of Mexican cuisine. If anyone has uh, tasted or even seen Mexican dishes, the colors are very earthy and they feel they have just come from the ground. It is nothing spectacular or artificial per se. So, this is what, like, there are no sharp blues or artificial contrasts, but they sort of, the colors complement one with the other. And the visuals start to envelop the viewer in an atmosphere of warmth and physicality. So, the by keeping these, magical elements and events within the same palette, the film suggests that these moments are arising naturally from the world's own textures. And now texture is equally important because Lubezki frequently focuses on close-ups of hands working dough, grinding spices, stirring mixtures, or plucking rose petals. So the purpose of these shots is more than to just depict simple cooking. So they are cultivating a sensory literacy, to say in the viewer. They're making, they're provoking the senses to feel, to smell, to taste. And when we are repeatedly witnessing this physicality of food preparation, the hands, the ingredients interacting with each other, and most of all with such care, it starts becoming plausible that the emotions might enter these ingredients and transform their effects. Now, to speak of the camera movement, this too contributes to this effect. The directors use gentle tracking shots and slow pans to create a sense of observational calm. It doesn't feel something out of the world, something extraordinary, but something that a person can feel, can see, can experience in his own home. It feels the camera many times the camera feels like a quiet guest in the house that starts noticing textures, gestures, and even movements like a wallflower without any intrusion. And to add to this, the consistency of motion, it ensures that the magical events are not highlighted through sudden shifts in style. They appear within the same cinematic language as if they are a part of reality, as if they are part of the film, not the highlight or the special point of the film. And this helps maintain the integrity and the philosophy of magical realism. Now, if we speak of the production design, uh, this is also a very important aspect, as it is providing the grounding, it is providing the foundation for all of this cinematographic expression through the lens of magic realism. Uh, if we speak of the De la Garza Grange, the directors have taken special care to render it with tactile authenticity. It feels very bucolic, it feels very village like. When we go to our grandmother's home and we are going to villages, it is not glitzy, it is not, we don't see the architecture as geometric, we don't see it as perfect shapes or angles, but what we see is human creation, and human creation naturally will not be as geometric in their architecture, and they will have some curves that evoke and transmit a sense of wholesomeness, of the sense of this is where the home is. And the directors have really put effort into incorporating these elements of village and bucolic life while constructing and ideating the De La Garza Ranch. The kitchen in this ranch becomes a space of fire, clay, wood, and metal, not the stylized aluminum, metallic, perfect shapes or very formal places that most urban dwellers are used to, but something created from hand and from labor, not from machines. The dining room, similarly, is formal and rigid, but the purpose of making it, formal and rigid is to reflect the matriarch, Mama Elena's authority, that this is her seat of power. This is where she controls the dynamics of the household. The courtyard, for it to speak of the courtyard serves as a transitional space that is open to possibility, but also it is framed, it is hemmed in by the house structural constraints. So in this way, the director also draw parallels from how the family interacts with the outside world. The outside world represents possibilities, but the members of the family are bound by household traditions. So they are not only symbolic in the abstract sense, they are part of a greater emotional architecture that the directors have thought about. And what is especially striking is when we see Tita's movement through her house and to the outside world and back and forth and back. We are seeing how she's interacting not only literally with her physical environment, but also emotionally and internally, how she's interacting to the outside world with the constraints placed on her by her mother, that is, her family and her traditions. So, in this very thoughtfully constructed environment, uh, the film's magical sequence are planned to sort of merge with the stylistic narrative of the novel, and they seem to emerge with a lot of clarity, and they seem to emerge with a lot of certainty. We can take the example of the quail in rose petal sauce, a dish that Tita prepares and is often cited as the most remembered and the most memorable scene of the film. And why is that so? Because people say it is not extravagant, but moreover, because it reveals the film's commitment to sort of depict magic as an extension of the sensory experience. That when we say that the emotions are overflowing, magical realism turns that overflow of emotions into palpable reality. And this was very much palpable, as I would say, in this scene. So the sequence began with emotion. Emotion was the seed that brought forth this magic. We are seeing Rose Tita is receiving the roses from Pedro, and then this emotion, we are entering the tactile phase process of preparation. So we are seeing Tita through her emotions that are overflowing from the pores of her body, from her hands directly into the petals. And when this dish is consumed by the family members and by Pedro, they the emotion is transferred from the food to their souls and to their bodies, and they cannot control this physical manifestation of intense love. And by the time we are seeing Gertrude is she's experiencing this overwhelming reaction. She's sweating pink rose scented sweat, and when she runs to the bath uh, to cool her down from the heat of the passion, the bath water turns into steam and she runs away from the house and the house catches fire. So, though some might interpret it as humorous or hyperbolistic, but the main purpose has been to make the viewer accept that emotional energy can infuse physical matter, right? So, if we talk about the wedding cake scene, the same thing happens. Tita doesn't want Pedro to marry someone else. So when her mother says to prepare the cake, she prepares the cake with what we call the ama, her cook. But the tears, the intense emotion she feels while making the cake, and she's not able to express them. So these intense emotions manifest into tears, and these tears charged and laden with emotion, when they fall into the cake batter, they they lead to the death of the cook. When the cook tastes it by grief, and when the guest at the wedding taste it, everyone is overcome with grief and they cannot control it and they start crying. And mama who who is observing everything cannot begin to comprehend these emotions, these overflow of emotions, how they are transfused into material objects and ingredients. So this in this scene also in the movie we are saying that the directors use the same visual restraint. It is not something like a witchy brew that happens, something magical happens, but it feels something that is very real, is very much palpable. It is not something extraterrestrial or out of this world that is going on, but something very innate and intrinsic to human societies. So here also what we are observing is the lack of stylistic differentiation between magical and non-magical moments is what forms the crux of this film. That the magical moments are as mundane, as normal as the non-magical moments. And this is what real magical realism is all about. So the directors have done a great job in achieving this. Uh, all of this, of course, leads us to the thematic terrain of the film, where we are going to speak of the issues of repression, communication, then gender, then desire, and how these elements converge to depict the inner and outer struggles of Tita. But but before that, I would like to speak of a little bit about the the deeper movements and the deeper elements of Como Agua para Chocolate, and start a discussion about the film's thematic foundations. So these themes which we have discussed above are not existing in isolation. That by themes, I'm referring to the visuals or the performances or the narrative choices. They are sort of interweaved, they are intertwined. They are, though they are a bit, they are separate, but they are intertwined like strands of a DNA in the film. This is what was ideated and effectuated by the directors. So the film speaks about repression and emotional inheritance and gendered power and non-verbal communication, and how desire under certain social conditions can be both destructive and transformative. And these issues are what are shaping the narrative's progression. Basically, how desires can have the creativity to destroy and heal and to enrich. And they are also carving the the the, the limits of the film's approach to magical realism. At the center of all these forces, as we have seen, is the problem of repression. Tita's life is completely controlled by family traditions and overall her mother, which she cannot imagine. She feels a sense of, she feels as if she's a prisoner of her mother's destiny, and she's condemned to serve her, to carry out that sentence till the death of her mother. And this is due to her position as her youngest daughter. And the film basically deals sort of a in a sort of symbolic way to the post-colonialism of Mexico after achieving, even after achieving independence, how the elites, which is sort of symbolically represented by Mama Elena, used this fatalism, this feudalism to control, and tradition, religion, authority to control the lives and the destinies of the subalterns, and how the subalterns were not allowed to speak in these matters and they just had to obey. So this rule of subjugation and submission is what structures the entire narrative. Not because it is forbidding Tita from being with Pedro, but rather because it is trapping her in a social role defined by duty rather than by choice. So Tita has to abstain from Pedro because it is because of her duty towards her mother, rather than, she not being in love with him. And her desires, her emotions, and creative capacities, they start to fit within a mold that the mold created by her mother, that where there is no room for self-expression. So this is not merely a domestic rule, it is a generational rule, which the women of the family have carried from generation to generation, in this lineage where the youngest daughter is expected to suppress everything for the sake of family obligation. So this film also conveys repression in a way that is explicit, but also it permeates everything, almost every element the of the stylistic and the physical tangible elements. For example, Mama Elena, she's authority in the purest form. She is the heartless, um, a lot of people would say the villain, not the villain, but not the most chummy character in the film. She's unyielding, uncompromising, heartless. Even the food laden with emotion that Tita prepares doesn't do anything to her because this represents her heart like stone. And her rule over the household is absolute. Her voice, her posture, her gaze. The actress has acted in a way to communicate authority and power, and that the world of the ranch, she is the center of that ranch. It operates according to her will. The rigidity now of her character is not simply a personality trait. It, moreover, symbolizes the cultural structures that limit women's autonomy. By making a woman the matriarch of the house, what the writer and the directors are subtly hinting is that patriarchy is not gender specific, but patriarchy is a system that can that limits the worldview of the opposite gender, that controls the narrative, not of the opposite gender, but of the so-called weaker sex, that is always the woman. And that patriarchy is about power, and in power, when a person has to dominate someone else, he doesn't need to be of a particular gender, but the one who is dominated will always be the subaltern, the one who cannot speak for himself, the one who accepts fate and destiny as society molds. And in many cases, in especially patriarchal societies, we are seeing the women as the victims, though in many cases, in many circumstances, as in this one, the matriarch can be more patriarchal than even the patriarch. So this no, this film is an interpretation of the idea that patriarchy is non-gendered, but the victims of patriarchy are almost always women or and marginalized communities who do not have free will, or the society doesn't deign to give them a voice, right? So in these societies, traditional roles sort of become internalized. They start becoming a ritual. They start becoming religious. They attain a sense of culture. They attain a sense of glory. When woman starts to suppress herself, she sees herself as this Christ-like Mary who sacrifices her own self for the sake of others. And this internalized patriarchy is transmitted across generations. And Tita's response to repression is channeled through the only domain where she holds any real agency, pardon. That is the kitchen. So the kitchen becomes her prison. The kitchen becomes her uh, her labor. The kitchen is her sanctuary. The kitchen is everything for her. The kitchen is the work, and it confines her to domestic labor, but also in a very subtle way. The role magical realism here plays is that it gives her a sort of power. However subtle, it gives her a sort of power that through her cooking, she's able to influence others, the behavior, the moods of others. So here the writer and the filmmakers are trying to convince, are trying to portray how even subjugated women, we can have a lot of parallels to Indian women, like even women who don't have any real agency, the society deprives them of real agency through their even in uh, areas not so influential, like let's say uh, domestic spheres. The woman asserts her agency and she tries to reclaim her identity. So we are seeing parallels between Mexico and India in this situation. That this is very true for especially in Indian context as well. Not sure for now, but earlier very much. So here through cooking, she can communicate emotions that society has forbidden her to express directly. So this is the film's most compelling one of the most compelling ideas, that the kitchen is often seen as a symbol of confinement, because in Mexico and in India, especially if you go to the rural regions, the kitchen is not like the gas stoves that we have. It is full of coal, wood to burn. It is a very forbidding place, because I have gone there and I cannot stand to stay there longer than 5 minutes. There is continuous smoke, very poor ventilation, very dimly lit spaces. But even in this forbidding area, she is trying to assert, or rather, the 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 will to assert, the desire to somehow assert herself is coming through the activities, the physical labor that she is doing. it this forbidding space, this constricting space, often the kitchen is not in the house, not like in the attached with the rooms, but very in a far corner of the house. It is like in a very marginalized area of the house, in India as well as in Mexico, in rural context. But even in this suppressing environment, she's able to find creativity, resistance, and even rebellion in these spaces. So for her, for Tita, cooking is not merely work, it is also emotional articulation. And she transforms these ingredients that for men, for the society, means nothing but to fill the stomach. And she transforms these ingredients into conveyors of meaning. And she starts crafting dishes through her subconscious desire and will to express her emotions that the society has consciously told her to drown. And she has crafted these dishes that carry her sorrow, carry her desire, her frustration, and joy, that the people who eat it cannot help but experience. So, this duality of the kitchen, as a space that is both restrictive and liberating, complicates any simple interpretation of gender dynamics in the film. It would be easy to read Tita as trapped in a domestic space that echoes the limitations imposed on many women throughout history. But the film goes on to show that domesticity itself can be reoriented, that even in servile domesticity, women can reshape their destiny and that of others, and the emotions and the moods of others, even in the most marginalized spheres of power. So, in this situation, her power emerges not from escaping the kitchen, but from reclaiming it, from charging it with emotional force. And her creativity does not depend on abandoning her environment, but infusing, accepting her destiny and doing everything to empower herself with the destiny that she's giving. That is, infusing that environment with the intensity of her inner life. of her inner vitality. She is rejuvenating even such a door damp place like a kitchen in a rural household with life, creativity, with energy. And this again suggests a more nuanced understanding of female agency, one that is not operating through overt opposition but through transformation. So she is not questioning or opposing the patriarchy and rejecting it, but she's working with the patriarchy by transforming herself and with it the role that the patriarchy has given her. So this is a sort of inner rejuvenation that reflects outward in a societal context, of course. Now, if we have to speak about the idea of food um, as communication, right? So, women in Mexico, as much as in rural India, now is a bit better. But if we are going to talk about the 90s and 80s when this novel was written, both there are major parallels between the society and culture between India and Mexico, especially the female question, the condition of women. And this is why I thought it was very pertinent to discuss this in a cinematic context. That the only way, there is a saying in the rural areas, and this saying is by women themselves, that the only way they can have any authority or power is through a man's belly, that they can convey their their emotions, their influence through their cooking, uh, uh, through their female duties. And a lot of women in rural India, that when I was young, I was growing up, I used to go to my grandparents' house in the village, and the women would come together and they would discuss. And men, I remember one conversation where the woman would say, "No, no, no, it is just because you are a woman in a," they used to say in the Khadibori standard dialect, that just because you are a woman doesn't mean that you are doomed, that you cannot assert yourself. It is just that men assert themselves directly, but the women, they can assert themselves by being invisible and by controlling the things that people don't notice. So that statement, and the woman laughed and they continued with the conversation. So that statement sort of stuck with me, and I wondered a lot about it. And here also, I'm finding, I was able to find the same element, that the women were not in Mexican society, were not able to speak. A woman has to be a non-entity. She has to, a good woman doesn't speak. A good woman does what she is told. A good woman is self-sacrificing. She doesn't think of herself. She spends most of her time doing domestic duties in the kitchen, or cleaning, or cooking, or taking care of the children. But even here, the women are able to exert, our protagonist Tita is able to exert considerable influence. In fact, she changes the destiny single-handedly of the members of the family through this cooking. So, since she cannot express her feelings verbally, either to Pedro or to Mama Elena or even to herself at times, the emotions flow into the cooking. And the film here does a great job of making this process feel natural. There is no such thing as abracadabra or anything. It is just as if the magic is imbued into the cooking process, as it is part of the method of preparing. The magic is an integral part of the cooking method, the preparation method, rather than it being something of a very X factor sort of extra thing. And the movement of Tita, if we are going to observe in the kitchen very carefully, they are extensions of her emotional state. Like when she's grieving, her hands are trembling. When she's consumed with longing, her her gestures start becoming very slow and very careful, we can say. And when she gets very angry, there is a certain sort of assertiveness, we can say, or certain force in even her physical motions. So these physical cues, the directors have thought that would lead the would lead the viewer to read food as text, right? As each dish she's preparing becomes a mesh, the each dish that she prepares becomes more than a dish. It becomes a message, a message that is encoded in texture, in flavor, in aroma, in color, that the emotions, the panic, the feelings that she's feeling are flowing into the food, and the people who eat it are able to feel these things, and their emotions change accordingly. So in a way, she's controlling and influencing everyone in the family subconsciously, but at the same time single-handedly. And the others are consuming these messages without realizing it, and their bodies are responding accordingly. So here the dynamic of the subjugated, and who is subjugating, who is uh, suppressing, and who is shaping the narrative comes into play. Is it Mama Elena through her authority, through her direct authority represented by patriarchy, or Tita through a passive sort of influence, a passive, subconscious, suppressed, indirect, uh, you can say, influence, right? So who is playing the more role? Because on the face it looks like it is Mama Tita who's controlling everything, but when you look deeper, you realize that it is, pardon, Mama Elena, no, Mama Elena. But if you look deeper, it is actually Tita who, without even knowing, is shaping the destiny of the whole family. So this Tita has done through food, and her dishes have in a way become narratives, a sort of emotional essay and an argument that the film emphasizes through the reactions of those who eat her cooking. Each magical moment is less about supernatural spectacle rather than about the redistribution of feeling. We are going to talk about the wedding cake scene again, and here the grief spreads like a silent infection, right? Those who eat it one by one, they fall prey to this infection. And this celebration that Mama Elena had ideated turns into a collective breakdown. The rose petal quail scenes discusses how desire explodes into the air and moves through Gertrudis like a physical force. And they are not just curiosities or something very humoristic or exaggerated, but they are basically dramatized representations of repressed emotions. Like it is said that when an emotion, when a feeling is repressed artificially, it is felt the most deeply by the person. And what magical realism does is give voice to that repressed emotion that festers like gangrene in the soul, and it demands to get out, but it cannot, and it festers inside, and it just gets bigger and bigger. And this, through this magical realism, it is sort of a outlet for these type of repressed emotionalities. And this is what the film depicts, that when denied a path through speech, it will find its way through the body. When you are not allowed to speak, it will reflect. When you are not allowed to feel, it will reflect in your body, in your movements, in your physical activities. And this has an even greater effect than to those around you. So now the theme of desire, if we are to speak of this, it is operating at a very deep level. Desire in this story is not simply romantic or sexual, it borders on the existential. So for Tita, the desire manifests itself as a hope to imagine her life beyond the shackles of her house and her household duties. And this desire leads to an impulse towards determining her own destiny. This desire is a seed that leads to her choosing her own destiny. And in this, Pedro, who is her lover, he becomes the catalyst. But he's not the essence. He's just the one who helps her reach this self-realization, right? And what we see at the end, what we realize at the end of the movie, is that what Tita wanted all along was not independence, not love, not success, or any a happy marriage. What she really wanted was being allowed to feel, was being allowed to feel emotionally, sentimentally, and also to choose to live life according to her own hopes and desires. So here the film is portraying for the different characters desire as both forceful and dangerous. So under strict social structures, longing becomes volatile. It cannot be expressed, and so it builds pressure. The film's magical realism is one way of showing that pressure's consequences. That desire suppressed spills into food, it spills into bodies, it sets things on fire, sometimes literally. And the final sequence of the film, when Tita and Pedro finally consummate their love uh, and ignite into flames, can be read not as a sentimental flourish, but as the last stage of a cumulative process. That it had been adding up, and suddenly it cannot hold any longer and it bursts forth. The magical realism of hope and desire turns into reality. That for two people whose emotions had been repressed for so long by society, that moment of union carries a ferocity which overwhelms the physical world. And this represents this seminal moment represents liberation, but also in a way represents the destructive nature of suppressed emotions as the whole um, de la fuerza, the hacienda, it catches fire from the passion of these two. So this film at the end suggests that repression may keep households in order, family structures in order, but it also does so at a cost. And the final bill arrives in a catastrophic storm, as we have seen in many families across the developing world and especially in the post colonial context. So, yeah, that would be my thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, sir, for such a wonderful and valuable discussion. Now, the dais is open for everyone, and I would like to call everyone to please come forward with your comments and any questions if you have any.
Can I come in, Tanmay?
Yes, ma'am, please.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Aman, for that really detailed analysis. And I certainly enjoyed the film. I have, of course, not read the novel, so I cannot say anything about the adaptation part of it. But what I really liked is the way it, um, the sphere of the domestic. It is not just, it is not merely depicted as some kind of a constrictive prison for the woman, but the domestic is also, weaponized. It that kitchen is actually a site of female power, and so that I thought was a very nice twist to this theme of the representing the domestic. And and of course, you have spoken exhaustively about magic realism, and that is definitely, like most Latin American literature, that is the main mode of representation and the main narrative technique used in Latin American literature. And here in this film, again, it becomes uh, it becomes some kind of a tool to show, to articulate female experience, because in the patriarchal order of things. Uh, Female sexuality comes, under the domain of the unrepresentable. So here, through magic realism, we can see how the body and sexuality and desire, all of these get represented. So these are some of the interesting parts of the film that I really enjoyed. Thank you once again, Aman, for making us watch this film. I wouldn't have known about it at all.
No, definitely. Like I would, and thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak about it also. I would say that the Latin American authors, especially during the Latin American boom, where there were many authors from Marquez to many authors used magical realism as a way to empower the the disempowered in their literary works, to show the agency of the intense power of emotions, that how they that could effectuate change, because the elite class, they had direct power, but even the what you call it, the underlings, those who are subjugated, they could also effectuate influence, but in more surreptitious ways, in a more unseen way. So through magical realism, the authors try to bring to light these these psycho-social phenomena, if you can say. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Geeta ma'am. Thank you, Aman sir. Is there anyone else with further questions or comments?
Um, yeah, Tanmaya, I'd like to speak now.
Yes.
Yeah, so thanks for the lovely film, Aman, and thank you also so much for giving such an elaborate introduction to the film. Sometimes when we watch the film, we don't get very much time to watch it in great detail. So this kind of a really good overview helps us, make sense of so much that is happening in the film. So in that sense, it really enriched the film for me. That is your introduction. Um, I was struck right at the outset about the with the comment about onion and the tears that flow. I mean, and there is a sense of a continuing, intergenerational, female. Um, Sadness, or that kind of underpins it, and also the way in which women, female characters in the film, strive to overcome their destiny. But really, I mean, it was such at so many levels, it's a film punctuated by sadness, and a sorrow that simply will does not just go away. And the various kinds of transformations, as you said, as we find in the film, the way in which the tears transform into salt. I mean, it was so amazing. The water that breaks with the birth of the child, and the salt that is the residue of that. I mean, and the tears that transform. I mean, it was such a remarkable, way, metaphor for the lingering sorrows, the sorrows that will not, go away. So I found it very, very intensely moving, kind of, yeah, somewhat heart-wrenching way, I thought, throughout. And I also found the narration, the way in which it begins, probably in the present, but kind of goes back to the great, aunt, two generations ago, to kind of see, see connections, with an ancestor. I mean, one is so used to tracing patrilineage, one's lineage and ancestry through the male line. But this way of kind of tracing, one's existence and sorrows through a female line, I found that very, very nice in the film. Overall, great film to watch. Only this title seemed a little befuddling to me. I don't know what thoughts you have about it. I mean, chocolate as in reference to food, is that how one would interpret it? But thanks for the film suggestion and the overview, Amnraj. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much. No, see, actually, the element of chocolate, what I thought was that chocolate doesn't mix well with water, right? So I thought there was this study in contrast, but a professor, like a teacher who also specialized in literature, Latin American literature, he told me that in Latin America, chocolate is not consumed as uh, especially in rural regions, not consumed as a treat or with sugar or something like little bit of sugar is there. But basically, when you add cocoa powder to boiling water, then it mixes very well. So the basically the title wants to represent that how when two elements seemingly they are not going to you put chocolate in water or milk, it doesn't permeate, it doesn't mix well. But in the right circumstances, where the passions are so big that the environment starts boiling, then they fuse together seamlessly. So this is basically the structure, the inspiration, what I personally feel. Yeah.
Thank you, Nikhil ma'am. Thank you, Aman sir. May I ask others to please come forward with their comments or questions if they have any? Fabian ma'am, do you have any observation to make or any question to ask? Is there anyone who wants to add anything to the ongoing discussion? Any new take or comment? Tarkesh sir, you have any comment to make?
Not at this stage.
Okay, sir. Sanjay sir, you have any observation or any question to ask?
Yes. Actually, in the novel, this explanation is given about the title. At one point, it says, Tita was literally like water for chocolate. This is exactly, and it is given within quotes. That is, I'm reading in translation as I don't know Spanish. So Tita was literally like water for chocolate. She was on the verge of boiling over. How irritable she was. So I think there is a certain boiling point of water at when you mix, the chocolate. It's also shown in the film, actually, the process of preparing the chocolate drink. So probably because it's already there in the novel, so it can be considered as an explanation of the title. And if we compare the novel with the film, then certain things like we see in the film in the beginning that the father of Tita, he finds that there is this daughter born like as mulet. So he has this cardiac arrest and he dies immediately. And we have seen also in the film that Mama Ellen, she watches, she has some photograph which she has kept secretly away from others. And in one of the scenes when we find that Tita is hiding in the cupboard and she's angry. Mama Elena is angry that what are you doing here? So probably she's scared of that this child, I mean Tita as a child can see this photograph. This photograph is the photograph of her lover, whom she could not marry. So this child, I think, through this is the uh, child from that earlier lover. So once it is discovered, it is shown in the film that the father has immediately, I mean, the husband of Elena has the cardiac arrest and he dies. So this discovery is it is shown in the film much later when Mama Elena is died. Mama Elena is already dead, and then we find that Tita is, just going through some of the materials left by her mother. Then she finds this photograph. So there are different ways of presenting this thing in the novel and the film.
No,
And
definitely. Yeah.
yes, and the recipe, obviously, as you said, that in the novel it is shown as January, February till going till December, so divided in 12 chapters. So what happens that um, if we read the novel, it also works as a book of recipe that one can learn how to cook. That is quite obvious in the novel, which you cannot do in the film. I mean, when you watch the film, you cannot know how that particular dish is prepared, what are the ingredients. But in the novel, all these ingredients are mentioned. That reminded me of some of the French novels also, that we have one novel by Calixte Béala, which is called Comment cuisiner son mari à l'africaine, which is how to cook your husband in African way. Oh, that was published in 2000. So that novel also uses recipe. In every chapter, there is one recipe, and then the story also moves forward. But here, I think there is a better arrangement in the novel, that the story is very much integrated with the recipe. And recipe works almost like alienation effect, because immediately in the novel I find that second person address is there. You do this, like in recipe book, that how to prepare this dish. Okay, so there are instructions given in second person.
No,
So yeah, so that effect is there in the novel, obviously, which is missing in the film. I mean,
yeah,
and certain details of particular years. For example, in the film, I find 1934 towards the end. I think by that time, Mexican Revolution was already over.
Mr. Sanjay,
Yes.
before moving on to the third point, I would like to
Yes.
clarify the
Sure. Sure.
first two so I don't miss them.
Yes.
So, see, when we are seeing, we open a recipe book, right? We open a recipe book and we are seeing mix eggs, do this, do this, do this. So it feels for the broader audience as sort of a mechanical process. But what the writer here has done is basically through the lens of a woman. Even when you are cooking a food, the emotions that you are feeling, he has depicted that. He has made alive a very mechanical process. right? And here the food is a central part which weaves, history, culture, and the lives of these women. So for what, basically what one interpretation is also that for a broader context, for you and me, for a lot of members here, when you are seeing a recipe, it is just a recipe. Even when let's say if I'm speaking of working women, they see a recipe, for them, they feel, oh, it waste of time, why am I doing this, right? But for the women who are trapped in this existence of domesticity, the recipe, which is very boring and mechanical, becomes something very magical for them, something very extraordinary for them. And they are able to express these emotions through a lot of their inner life through cooking. So this structuring of the recipe at the beginning of each theme is sort of central to this depiction of even how ordinary things which we feel have no value, like have a deep meaning for the people who are sort of, we can say, this is their life, right? When we are seeing someone is doing some work which we don't understand or which we have never done before, it looks very non-important, not very important to us. But the person who is doing that, let's say an artist on the street who is drawing, and we feel that a lot of people might think he's wasting time or something like that. For even that artist doing that so-called menial work has a lot of symbolic, every all sorts of value, like every point in his life has brought him to this moment. So for a lot of women, these recipes mean much more than just simple edible things. And this is what the writer has done, brought to the fore through his writing. uh, yeah, and the film has also depicted as well as it could. Now, your first question about Mama Elena not being very furious and angry when Tita discovers her secrets is again an allegory and symbolism to the elites, the relationship between the elites and the people who are ruled, you can say. So the elites create the rules for the people to follow, and if they don't follow the rules, they are severely castigated. But here again, what the author wishes to depict as the elite have a lot of skeletons in their own closets. When they get the opportunity, they break the rules. It is just that they don't want the people to see it. The elites want to maintain this layer of impermeability, this higher pedestal that they want to sit. And this sort of very closely, the figure of Mama Elena and her exploits and her life reflected the behavior of the elites, which we are seeing in even in Indian societies. Like if you are going, I don't know if it is politically correct to say that if you're talking about Brahmanical Hinduism, and there the elites are concentrating the narrative, they are setting the pace, but all their predilections, their sins, their peccadillos, the elites are very focused on sort of not letting the society, the world know. So these allegories can be traced. We can make the comparisons over there. That a lot of uh, scholarly works have highlighted this um, point of the authors and the directors or the cinematographers' intention to subtly, surreptitiously paint the division of class, that one is accountable and the other is not. So that's one thing to note. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. So I will continue. Uh, in the film, we see the particular year, 1934, for example, that is towards the end of the film. Whereas in the novel, nowhere it is mentioned that what happens in which year. But of course, from the reference, we can know that it is between 1910 and 1920 when Mexican Revolution was going on. So another point was that in the film, I think compared to the novel, the image of revolutionary is not so much explored, as mostly we see them, okay, dancing, coming to the house of Tita, and what happens in the novel, that first time these revolutionaries come, and there we have an opportunity to see what kind of personality Mama Elena is, because she takes out the gun, and she is already aware that, I mean, she has been told by others that these revolutionaries are, very bad people. They come and they destroy the property, they do this and that. And so she is already cautious, and she already takes out her gun, and she is ready to face them. But what happens finally, that the revolutionaries, she finds finally that revolutionaries are not so bad, but they want support from her. They want like her chickens and certain, I mean, something for food. And they also want some property, but she doesn't allow them to enter her house. So she is shown as someone who is like protecting the house. She is so powerful, so courageous that she can protect the family. This kind of representation is missing in the film. And yes, and there are several flashbacks in the novel also. Even if
Yes.
we see that there is a kind of progression from
Yeah.
January to December, there are several flashbacks.
Mhm.
Yes. Yeah, that's also.
Yeah, so before going to this point, I would like to briefly elaborate on this. See, because in the novel, one can paint a very complex portrait of a person, right? And the protector, the abuser can be the protector in certain instances. The protector can be the abuser in determined instances. But then again, it the wording is such that it makes the reader think that is the abuser protecting to safeguard his own interests, or is the protector abusing to with a sense of in a misguided sense of overprotectionism. So the novel in the novel there is much more perceptiveness, acceptance, and even the practice of portraying a very different shades of a character, multiple shades of a character integrated into one. Now, if you're talking about a film, now this film is not very Art Deco type. That when you leave the cinema, you are confused what you should feel or what you should not feel. This film was primarily aimed for commercial audiences. So if it depicted and what do commercial audiences like, they would like a linear flow, right? This person is bad, this person is good, this person is a victim, this person is a suppressor. That helps them sort of categorize and understand. And when they are able to understand the film or the material, they are able to appreciate it. So for commercial audiences, I think, I don't know if I should say this, but the director took the right decision to not include this thing, and because it blurs from the narrative of are you getting the power structures. But in the novel, even one line can do a lot of show a lot of maturity and a lot of shades of a character, right? When we are reading novels, it is uh, even from the most banal Harry Potter novels, the writer will always portray a sort of duality, a lot of mixed uh, characters combined into one. This is how human beings are. But in the film, I don't know if that would be feasible or sagacious or sage, because the people who are consuming it, they need someone to cheer for, they need someone to feel for. And if they are confused, I'm not sure if this would really be the commercial success it has become. So on this, I would say this. And I hope, I'm not sure what would the others feel about this. So
Thank you, Sanjay sir. Thank you, Amnraj sir. Is there anyone else with further comments or questions? The dais is still open for you.
Mr. Sanjay, you were I cut you off in the middle. So if you have anything, you can please ask.
No, it's fine. You have already discussed all the aspects. I think most of the aspects, I would say.
Is there anyone else with
I was
father could?
sorry,
Okay.
I was just thinking compared to other food films, like lots of food films we have. And interestingly, this was released in 1992, so which is much earlier. Now, most of the food films which I have seen there in 21st century, and like even including Indian films like Lunchbox, for example, or French film Delicieux, which is also quite recent, 2021, in fact. So that way, this film, I don't know where does it stand compared to other food films, because it was released much earlier, 1992.
Yeah, for this, I would say that the film was adapted only because the novel was such a big success. And the roots of the film is the novel. And the roots of the novel is the condition, not food, but the condition of women and the desire to depict it through magical realism. And where did this magical realism come from? From the Latin American boom, which we are seeing in the 50s, 60s, that extended to the 70s. So Laura Esquivel has sort of extended that. Are you saying so? This film and this novel are not a precursor, but they are sort of a, what you call it, a sequel of literary traditions, I would say, because what Laura Esquivel wanted uh, to talk about was the condition of women, and she used food as a tool to to abort this topic of women and how they express themselves, their inner life through uh, through food. Because in rural Mexico, even in rural India, a lot of women, especially if you're talking about unmarried women, let's say young women, they are confined to the kitchen spaces and all that. So this is the only tool that they have. So she has tried to build a narrative through this. But her main inspiration, she has she herself, I think she accepted in an interview that her main inspiration was depicting lives of ordinary women in rural settings with a tinge of magical realism, and food happened to be that thing which could transform and depict their experiences. So yeah, this is what would it, because in other now what the films that we are seeing is the commercialization of food, right? The gastronomy, the high fancy gastronomy with the Michelin stars and all that. But this food of Laura Esquivel is much more intimate, is like a secret that only a woman knows. So basically, a lot of emotional elements uh, that are depicted, the emotional, in a rich emotional life of a woman, that are depicted through a mundane things like food, right? For the untrained eye. So yeah.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else with their observation, comments, or any question? I think this is for today. So,
Just a
yes, sir. Yes.
question. If you are reading the appearance of recipe, the food preparation, uh, how it is integrated into the entire narrative and works as a kind of or stands for woman, kitchen, and the liberation theme of the novel. Uh, what about the background of the war, revolution? How does it is? Does it come only as a background, or is it also integrated into the theme? Uh, why I'm asking is that if you're reading it as a kind of metaphor, the culmination of the narrative that when you feel that intense emotion of fulfillment, what happens to it? So it's a kind of tragic element is there. So if you can look at this narrative culmination and extend the metaphor to uh, liberation of gender women, and then also liberation of Mexico from the world elite, uh, then what does this narrative culmination mean to those two things?
So this is one element which I have not researched much, but what I would interpret it as, if we are taking, let's say, we have the family structure of Mama Elena, Tita, and the daughters, which we are symbolizing by the elites versus the 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 proletariat. I don't know, the people who are have to work, or who are disenfranchised. So what is happening in the story is that the events are shaping such outside elements are coming into their closed off home, that is disrupting the power structure, that is disrupting the accepted roles that each character has to play. The coming of Pedro, the even I think it was uh, a daughter, she I'm not getting the name. I'm the Guardiola, I think. So she, in a fit of passion, she runs away from the house, setting it on fire with the passion, and she marries off and runs away with a, a revolutionary leader. So
Get through this.
Gertrudis, pardon. Yeah, so she runs away with the leader. So this is a bit literal representation, but at the same time, when we are seeing external elements coming into the play, right? Earlier, Mexico was Catholic. Elites controlled the, say, poor and the underclass, and the poor and the underclass said, "This is our destiny. We cannot change it. We accept it." What happened with the Revolutionary War was elements like socialism, communism uh, came, and this brought a sense of it changed the people's worldview. It introduced elements. They thought that they could, feel empowered. They had the right to feel. They had the right to demand rights, and this caused a lot of disruption in the traditional structure, societal structure, and this is aptly mirrored in the household setting, where Mama Elena, representing the elites, was very contempt, all the daughters obedient, everything. But now these foreign elements come to the house, their lovers, and with them they start questioning their destiny. They start challenging the authority of the traditional centers of power. Are you getting? So for me, the interpretation initial would be that this is how it is represented, and what we are seeing is these outside elements like the lovers, they are causing such a commotion in the bodies and in the souls of the women, that through magical realism they are being or set on fire, like they are on fire, and with them the hacienda also burns. So the hacienda, that is the big ranch, it is sort of a metaphor for the country, that these foreign ideas have marked a shift in the thinking of the people who earlier accepted their roles easily, in both in the house context and in the broader Mexican context. And the reaction of this is inc- increased passions of the people, fueled by desire, fueled by hope of finding independence, of liberty. And this is what is setting the whole hacienda on fire multiple times. So this sort of mirrors the instability and the destruction caused. Are you getting what I'm trying to say? In the wake of the revolution, and it mirrors temporally and symbolically the lives of the protagonist, the villain, and their lovers. Yeah. So I hope I have able to at least begin to get an approximation of the parallelisms between the film and the broader revolutionary context.
Yeah, it's very good attempt to unravel it through the lens of the revolution. But the question was more to do with the narrative culmination. What happens to the uh, protagonist at the end, the tragedy. So, how do we understand this tragedy if you are drawing parallels between the liberation of women on the one hand and the liberation of Mexico from the clutches of the oppressive structure? What does tragedy stands for?
For me, personally, it would stand for see when there is political instability, when there is um, challenging of authority, it is usually the underclass that have to bear the brunt. Even though the elites were marginalized, they have lost their authority. They were relatively unscathed physically, but the horrors of war, it is the peasants, it is the poor who have to suffer. Right. And so this would basically mirror that for a cause to succeed, there has been a lot of sacrifices. And this mirrors the life of Tita. At the end, the underclass, they begin with a lot of expectations and hopes. They start to challenge the elites and they start to question them. But the ensuing, how would I describe it? The storm that follows, they are its biggest victims. So their hope, their desire for a better life is what consumes them because this is the how the system is set up. So I hope this makes a bit more sense.
Yeah, yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Tarakwesha sir. Do we have any more comment or question? Is there anyone with further comment or question before we close today?
Can I quickly come in?
Yeah, no, please.
Okay, thank you so much, Talking Films Online and Amnraj Singh, just as well. Thanks a lot for joining. And yes, so my question will revolve around the element of magical realism, which somebody pointed out. When I was during the study of a text called Chronicles of the Death Foretold by Garcia Marquez. So we were taught the essential post-colonial element that was brought out because of the sense of magical realism that was going into that, how people would invest their particular conviction and they would intend to believe in intend to believe in omen and superstitions and all of that, which was more of an Eastern perspective, not so Western. So I came across, so when somebody pointed out this aspect of magical realism, I just came to ponder over this element which has been taken into practice in the movie to show this. So in this context, sir, will you call this movie in any way post-colonial, given also the factor of the kind of use of the language of body and gestures, both which I'm really glad that I came to see this in both the ways coming from both male and female, and not just an objectification of the female. So, what are your views on that?
No, above all, I would say that, and thank you for the question. Above all, I would say that magical realism is not about East versus West. It is more about Latin American writers. Whole of Latin America, as you know, racially is mestizo, right? They have the Western part and they have the indigenous part. So magic realism, at least for me, is always post-colonial because the power structures we are seeing in Latin America from that even in that time and they continue to this day, they are inherited from Western power structures, from the European colonists who established these structures, and the remnants are remaining. And the tragedy, the despair that is brought on the lives of the underclass Earlier, the indigenous people, now the subalterns, including the women who are deprived of their agency, just like the slaves were in earlier time. So, magical realism is not about the East, but more about empowerment through reclaiming the indigenous identity. Because you have to also take into account that this belief in magic, right? If for example, if I'm going to talk about magic in the Western context, in the medieval and the early modern Europe, it was something very evil done by witches that had to be, suppressed, right? And magic in the indigenous society, we are leaving East out of this. Magic in the indigenous society is much more uh, has a much more positive connotations. There are no witches, there are healers, be it women or men. There are shamans, be it women or men, right? They are religious leaders. In many tribes, there are women who are leading these religious rituals for healing and all that. So, through reclaiming these writers of the Latin American boom, use magical realism to reclaim this part of their indigenous identity in a way to combat the effects of colonialism. Are you getting it? So, for me, at least, this is what it signifies when it comes to magical realism. That for them, magic was nothing extraordinary, like in the European context. For them, for the indigenous tribes, magic is a part of life that has become real. So, this is how they are weaving together both of their identities, and we are watching the interplay of them in the literary works. I hope I've been able to at
Yes,
least.
yes, sir. And you did broaden my perspective on the element, the practice of magical realism as not just restricted to the frame of post-colonial organization and program. Thank you so much again.
Thank you, Ananya. Thank you, Amnraj sir. Is there anyone else with any more comment or question? I think now finally we can close for today. So I will offer my vote of thanks now. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining today's discussion. Now, on the verge of closing today's talk, I want to convey my warm regards and deep appreciation to everyone present here. On behalf of TFO, I want to thank Amnraj sir for making today's evening so enriching and deeply rooted in our love for cinema. I also want to thank my co-interns for their relentless efforts in making this community active and running. Finally, last but not least, I want to thank Geeta ma'am and Nikhila ma'am for making this platform possible so that we can meet every Saturday. Now, as every good day comes to an end, today the discussion ends now. Thank you and good night.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tanmay. Thank you,
Thank
Aman.
you.
Very much. Thanks, everyone. Good night. We'll meet.